good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we're talking with an author who has not only created multiple books, but also a trilogy. And it's interesting when you talk to authors that are really on the cutting edge of creating content, for adults, but also for teenagers and children, but how that content can be riveting, it can be very interesting, there can be pieces of history, but also some pieces of spirituality and some soulfulness that I think is a must and a need in today's literature. And it's interesting because I found that when I was growing up, I remember I was always looking for books that really connected with me, connected with who I felt I was as, like a budding child or adult teenager, and being able to connect with the characters, understanding their perspective, but better yet, kind of feeling as though I was almost a part of that kind of life or culture. And so when you find someone that is creating this type of content that is so interesting and in-depth and has a story and has a historical component and really has that component of, doing the right thing, making changes, and then that spirituality component, you definitely want to bring them on the show. And so on today's show, I'm interviewing Mel Lewis. Mel is, she's an author, but she's a children and adult fiction author. And today I really want to talk specifically about this specific trilogy that she's created. And it's interesting because there are 4 main characters in the trilogy, and each one of these characters really has their own story, dealing with their own issues and being able to overcome those issues. Mel, great to have you on Live Your True Life Perspectives. How are you doing today?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Ashley. It's really awesome to be interviewed by you and, just to, completely interact with a completely different audience to what I'm used to. So very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Mel, real quick, before we continue into talking about the trilogy and the characters and the impact that they have, give us a little more backstory. Tell us a little bit more about where you're located and kind of also, your quest as an author and why, you've written these books and why you choose to be a children and adult author.
Okay, so I am based in Africa. I live in South Africa and actually right at the tip of South Africa. So that's right at the bottom of Africa, Cape Town. And we call it the Mother City. It's a really, really beautiful place. And a lot of people actually come to Cape Town to visit because of its extreme, beautiful kind of natural beauty. So that's where I'm based. And I am an author kind of a little bit late in life. I have done a lot of different things and kind of, towards my 40s, I know I shouldn't probably share that, but I have. There, it's out there. Oh dear. But so, once you've kind of married, kids, career, this, that, changed, and kind of really started to find my own voice in terms of what I really wanted to do and how I wanted to participate in this life and in this world. And that came through very strongly in writing. And so it started kind of as my first adult book, which came from a place that I kind of in hindsight realized of kind of deep sadness. I was writing just really a fictional novel, and only once I'd actually put it out there into the world did I realize that I was writing about a friend I'd lost and the process of grieving. The book itself isn't that heavy, but it was all in there somehow. And so that was kind of where it all started. And so I've just started this kind of whole new, I almost want to say like persona, in the sense that, I didn't go to university and study English language. I went to university and I studied science, so it's like, it's so completely different, but this, like, where you're supposed to be. So this is where I'm supposed to be. And then kind of moving on to kids fiction was really around, looking at my kids and what they were reading. And my son's an avid reader. And he was reading a lot of stuff like Harry Potter and all the Alex Rider series. And I was seeing that the kids were really reading a lot of stuff that was not set in Africa, that wasn't necessarily telling stories and legends and magical, insightful stories about Africa at all. And I thought, wow, there's like this huge gap in the market for kids' books, this kind of like tween to young adult phase in children's lives that doesn't have any kind of stories that are based here. And why not? And so started kind of going down this, road or rabbit hole and really finding out about how I could create a story for that type of age group, kind of aimed at like my son. And he actually is one of my first readers. He often gets like a first draft, and then he sits and tells me about all the typos. But it's really that's kind of where the kind of writing process all started and where it's going. And into the future, I hope to carry on writing. I'm currently about to launch a second adult novel, probably end of Feb, March. So that's happening. And then I'll be writing a kind of murder mystery series as well, also aimed at adults. And then in terms of the kids' books, hoping to kind of actually make those, either turn them into some kind of visual, so maybe a movie or something like that. I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. But would really like to, because that kind of content with mixed race children is really important to see, and especially in South Africa. So there's a lot of guys looking for that content at the moment. So who knows? I suppose the sky's the limit, and it's just a case of time in amongst life getting to everything. But I write every day, and I kind of do as many words as I can, and kind of step, one foot in front of the other, and slowly it gets done, basically. But that's my story.
I think there's a lot of folks that are probably listening to the show right now that have always wanted to write. And, I think it's something that a lot of people talk about, but it's really something that you really have to work at. And, I'm a writer as well, but definitely a totally different genre. The self-help is totally different, but, it's like it takes work and it takes dedication. And sometimes, there's days when you're like, everything comes to you. And then there's days where you're like, you throw in the towel. But when it comes to this trilogy, Libertalia, and this trilogy is very interesting. And I like the fact that it is set it's set in Africa, because you're right there. I haven't seen a lot of a book set in Africa. Let me ask you, how much do you believe that impacts a child or a teenager reading that when a book is actually, based in the country, in the area, in the place that they live?
So the feedback that I've had from the teenagers here in South Africa has been great, in the sense that even though, they don't necessarily know these characters, what happens is that they really, really can identify with the characters. They're like, oh yeah, I've been to that place, or I've heard about that, or I can imagine that place in my mind. And they see a completely new world within context. It's not this faraway place that you maybe see on TV. There's a real story that's interesting and full of adventure happening like down the road. And so it brings excitement right to their doorstep. So I think it has huge impact, and it shows you that where you live isn't, substandard. It's good. It's good enough to have awesome stories in. And so I think it is very impactful, and to be able to connect and to identify with the characters.
I like that. And, I think the interesting part, too, is that I like it from the other angle as well, is that, when it is based in a place that you don't live, I think, for American teenagers or Canadian teenagers or, around the world, I think this book would be this trilogy would be very interesting, because it's in a place that they might not be familiar with. I mean, we always know that travel can really open our minds and can really open to new experiences. And I think that's also a really cool takeaway for folks that don't live in Africa.
definitely. I remember reading about Hong Kong as a child. I read those Taipan books. Probably not appropriate reading for a young teen, but anyway, I loved them. I was learning about Chinese culture and about Hong Kong and all these amazing places and people. And it was, I went there in my mind, and it was fantastic. So I really hope that, kids from other countries and other places will be given that opportunity, but this time in Africa. So, couldn't agree more.
This is amazing. We have a lot more to discuss, so you'll want to stay with us. Mel's going to be here the entire show. We're going to be talking more about the trilogy, more about the characters, the various callings of the characters, the impact of that, and how these books, impact the reader. And I think this is so interesting because I'm very fascinated with books that impact us in a positive, healthy way, and that is what we're dealing with today. So I look forward to it. So stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we're talking with Mel Lewis, children and adult fiction author, and specifically today, we began talking about her latest trilogy. And Mel, it's great to have you on the show, and let's talk some about the characters in this trilogy. Let's talk about the 4 main characters, and I don't know which one you want to talk about first, but I think I would probably want to start with William. Is one of my favorite characters in the trilogy for multiple reasons, from the self-help component concept and from seeing him be able to blossom from a situation. Can you talk more about that character?
Absolutely. And I can agree more. William is absolutely one of my favorite characters too, although it is always tricky to say that because, of course, they are almost like my children, these characters, and so I have to love them all equally. But he definitely has a place in my heart. So William is, he's brought up in a dysfunctional family situation. His father is a criminal. He's a mean man. And he treats his children badly. He punishes them. He hurts them. He's horrible. So William grows up in this environment. So he doesn't really understand love and kindness and friendship. And, he's been pulled from school to school all over the world. So when he meets the other 3 characters who are all at the school that he arrives at, in kind of the Eastern Cape of South Africa, he is kind of like, why are they being nice to me kind of thing. And slowly, through their normal kind of kid kindness, they start to kind of peel off the layers, that he's been putting on in order to survive in his world. And he is now turning into this other person that is actually inside this hard kind of shell of a guy. And as the books progress, slowly, we kind of peel off these layers and we see who he really is. And I think it's just a fantastic journey because I love who he's turning out to be. So he's a great character. And it's so nice to work with him because he's evolving.
I like it because I feel like so many people, so many children, so many teenagers, we all know that we can be somewhat a product of our environment, and dealing with the family dynamic is so critical. And if the family dynamic is anything but, healthy, or if we have some challenges or, some violence or some narcissism or whatever it looks like, it's hard because they've been trained around that. And I think it's interesting how you basically help him come out of that shell through the help of the other characters.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And I mean, those characters are what really does turn him around. And I mean, most specifically, if I may go on to the next character, the main character really is Karabu. And Karabu is the one who I would say almost works the hardest to, she sees something in him that the others in the beginning really don't. They're like, seriously, this guy is such a dweeb. And and she's the one that she's just like, no, there's something there, you know, she can see it, and she can feel it. Sure, there's a little bit of a pash, but it's really, you know, she knows that he is a good guy and she believes in him, and she just can't help wanting to be friends with him. And so yeah, but she's got a completely different journey and different struggle in her own right. So she's your kind of classic sporty academic student. She just wants to be on the, I think in America you call it field hockey. We just call it hockey. She wants to be in the hockey team, and she wants to kind of make, you know, province. So that's like, you know, kind of a step up. And she just, you know, wants to excel and be a great kind of team, like that's her vibe. And then she gets a calling from her ancestors. And so that is very much a spiritual calling for her to become a healer. And this actually does happen to a lot of young people in South Africa, where they get this calling to be what we call a sangoma, which is a spiritual healer. And she gets this calling, and she's like, what? She's a modern kid going to a fancy private school, doing her thing, and now she's got this whole ancestor thing going on. And she's like, what is this about? And she wants to reject it, but she can't. You know, it's not something you can just go, I don't want that. So her struggle is learning to integrate her calling into her modern existence. And I really wanted to play with this struggle because it is something that does happen to people, and see how she could cope with it, and she could maybe use this gift, this talent, and how she could bring that into her life, and she does. And so her journey to me is also very, very exciting. Yeah, so she couldn't do it, though, without her bestie. She does have a bestie who is called Isla. And Isla is also a lovely girl, sporty, academic. Her and Karabu have been mates forever. But she's quite taken by boys, good old Isla. She's also quite pretty. And she also actually is great for Karabu in terms of that she grounds her. You know, so... You know, it's easy to think, oh, Isla might be Karabu's sidekick, but Isla is very much her own person, but she really, really helps Karabu to just kind of sometimes get out of her head and her mood swings. And as the books progress, there are times when Isla really shines, and then there are times when, you know, she looks like a ditz. So she's a very kind of interesting character who is, you know, she is sometimes torn. She can quite easily manipulate situations, but she's actually a really good person. So she struggles also to kind of manage that. And I think that's also part of growing up as a teen, is that, you know, you learn, oh, okay, if I say that, that's quite a mean thing. Gosh, okay, mustn't speak to people like that. So was exploring a lot of kind of self-learning through her as a character. And then the final character is Mzi, which is a shortening of the name Mzilikazi. And this is where a lot of the history comes in as well. So he is the descendant of African kings from what is today modern Zimbabwe. And he is like the head boy. He's head of the rugby team, you know, which would be like, I think, similar to like American football in terms of how much people love it. And, you know, so he's like a stud, but also lovely, lovely guy, but learns about, you know, how what he thinks is his perfect family actually isn't, and how he internalizes that, and how he draws himself away from people in order to deal with that. So he also, even though he's, you know, naturally gifted and talented and everybody adores him, he also has stuff to work through. So yeah, so they sound like really complicated kids, but they're really lovely. They are just normal teenagers, but of course I had to work them a little bit. They had to sweat to be in the book. So, those are them.
I love it. Because when you think about it, nobody is simple. Everybody has a unique everything. And it's interesting because, growing up nowadays with the media and the impact and everything that we're dealing with, the social phenomenon, the personal situations, the family dynamics. The ancestry, the way that we're supposed to live, the way that people want you to live, your impact of your inner calling that's different from maybe how, this world is. All of these things impact. And I like how you've created these characters that are all dealing with these different things and then kind of coming together to kind of create a team that eventually has to get along and communicate and respect one another.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what they have to do. And they need to, it's not a classic kind of adventure solve in terms of storyline, but there is, they do need to work together to figure stuff out. So very, very much the case.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, and I like the use, and I want to talk about it a little bit, and then we'll get more into it in our next segment. But let's talk about how you weave the different pieces of history together. Let's kind of start talking about it now, and then we'll continue it here in the next segment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to try and find something that would appeal to, a young teen. And I think pirates are cool. So I started to think around pirates and maybe modern day pirates. And, we've heard about like Somali pirates, but that's not that interesting. Were there ever like ancient pirates in Africa? And so started researching that and found out about this place called Libertalia, which was a fabled town on Madagascar. Madagascar is a massive island next to Africa. And on this island was this town called Libertalia, and it was a free town for pirates. And that was at the time of when, like, you had the British kind of colonialists and the Dutch colonialists kind of moving around Africa. And so, of course, there must have been pirates coming in. There was, tons of stuff being shipped around Africa, slaves as well. But this was a free town where pirates were said to kind of, whenever they attacked a boat, took the loot, and if there were slaves, they took the slaves and then they freed them on Libertalia. So it's a lovely concept, and obviously liberty written into Libertalia. So this town was a really good start for me in terms of, yes, there were pirates, they were near in or around Africa, and then the next part was, how do I find treasure?
When we return, we'll be talking more about that, more of the Liberty and Libertalia, and how to kind of the interesting part of how this is weaved in and out by Mel, which I think is genius. So stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time. You know it. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. If you're joining us today, you've been probably listening to Mel Lewis here. Mel has been on the show today to discuss her latest trilogy, Libertalia. And, Mel, right before we went to break, you were talking about, the history and the pirates and the different treasure seeking that you've weaved together, as well as the freeing of the slaves, aka the liberty piece of this. How did that all come about? Was that all in your mind's eye, or how did you decide to piece that together?
Well, that is all history. It's there, like in the history books. Well, okay, online, so not quite books, but it's all it's all there in terms of the history of these pirates that were in and around Africa. And I was just like, wow, this is the stuff they should teach at school. But
that's true. They should teach this stuff in school. Yeah,
they should.
That would be great.
I know, we only know about Caribbean pirates, right? So that's kind of where that started. And I was just looking for this historical pirate connection, because I thought, cool, that's a good start. And then the obvious is like, well, where there are pirates, there are treasure. So that led me to look for lost treasure in Africa, because I thought, well, I need to kind of pull some stories together here, and I'm looking for a historical fiction element. So I found out that there was this lost treasure, well, actually still is, this lost treasure, and it is there was a king called Lobengula, which is quite a mouthful, but Lobengula was said to have amassed piles of ivory, so elephant tusks, diamonds that his men had mined in South Africa and brought to Zimbabwe, what is modern-day Zimbabwe, as well as gold. So there were gold mines in Zimbabwe and also in Johannesburg. And his men and the people that were part of his tribe or his kingdom had amassed all this treasure, and he was apparently sitting on all this treasure. Then at the same time, you've got Cecil John Rhodes. So he was British, and he was the guy who said to the Queen, I will paint Africa red for my Queen. And his plan was to go from Cape to Cairo and turn all of those African countries into British colonies. And so what he did, he was obviously already here in South Africa, and his next place to overthrow would have been then what is modern day Zimbabwe, but kind of the city of Bulawayo. And Lobengula, this king with all this treasure, was there. And so what happened was that Cecil John Rhodes he went up to Zim and he completely destroyed Bulawayo and captured Lobengula and then tried to find the treasure. But basically they burnt this town to the ground and there was nothing left except a small silver elephant that they found kind of in the ashes. That was all of the treasure they ever found. And it was so interesting to me that this happened, that the story goes that Lobengula sent 5 guys away to go and actually, bury the treasure or hide it. And then when they came back, he killed them. And then he died. And so the story goes that this treasure does in fact exist. We just don't know where, it's a fable. And I think, that was the treasure, the kind of treasure that I was looking for, was that this lost treasure that could still exist. You never know. And how do I bring that into the story? And so then I started kind of working it back. So how do we connect pirates to Cecil John Rhodes, to Lobengula, and pull it all together? And it was such fun, kind of almost like taking a wooden spoon and then mixing it all together and kind of pulling together a story that was, vaguely historically correct. And, maybe I missed out on a few hundred years here or there, but it was really, really awesome because basically I'm a bit of a history nerd and I love history. So as a kid, I took history. And so, if you're the kind of kid who isn't interested about that kind of stuff, then maybe this would bore you to tears. But I hope that, kids are interested in learning about these kinds of things that happened in time and how that could evolve into a new interesting story. So that was really kind of where oh, cool. Yeah. So that was really how it all started. It was Pirates Treasure. How do we bring it all together? And then the story started forming. And then the characters, bringing them into that, because I had to have modern day characters in terms of the kids. I wanted them to be kids that current kids could identify with. They have cell phones, they have crushes, they have divorced parents, they have it's modern day stuff that is real, so they can identify. But then you can have a little bit of fun with the historical stuff and how that historical stuff impacts these modern day kids. So, that was how it all came together.
I love that. And I want to switch gears because I love that whole concept. I love going into that historical. And I do think especially I like to talk about things that have not been really overly talked about and really be able to get into that, because I think that is fascinating. As it, when I was growing up, I was fascinated by that, any sort of treasure or mystery. But let's switch gears to the spiritual component. I
Sure.
find it very interesting how your main character is drawn and is basically called. And I think, we look back at, historical record, from everything, obviously from Jesus to everybody, even Harry Potter, when you look at that, was called to take on a duty that he wasn't necessarily ready for. And I've read all the Harry Potter books, by the way. I'm just like your son. But, I've loved them, and they were so great. And, I feel like a lot of people, more than we know it, because I feel the same. I was called, and mine wasn't from historical, mine wasn't a family thing, but it was more deeper than that. And it was interesting. And when you get that calling, it's like you can act like it doesn't exist, but there comes a time when you kind of have to deal with reality. And I think it's interesting, though, how you have her, because that's great at such a young age, having to deal with this, coming to terms with that, and I love the fact that you weave in the spiritual component into this trilogy. Tell me more about kind of the journey of that, and what really fed into that when you were writing this trilogy to put that in there.
Yeah. So it initially started as a kind of, when I was working, in the concept phases of the book, I was thinking, okay, cool, we've got treasure, we've got pirates. And then I was like, yeah, but we need something a little bit like magical, and then I was like, yeah, but like, the whole wand magic of Harry Potter isn't really going to cut it in Africa. So then I was like, okay, well, what have we got to work with? And I immediately went then to the spiritual around the sangoma and what that means within communities and what they bring. And I really wanted to explore that within a way that would be palatable, would be easy, would be friendly for your kind of young teen and your young adults, so that they could have a taste of African spirituality and what that could mean without getting worried or scared, because we do have sangomas. Sangomas are real spiritual healers here in Africa. And I wanted to kind of bring them to light in a way so that it was easy for people to understand and not go into like heavy detail, but to make it a thing that was okay, and to show that, yes, Karabu was scared or upset and confused by this, but how she was able to conquer that and bring that into her life. And she now has growing kind of abilities. And the other character that I dragged in for that was her teacher. So when you are called by your ancestors in African culture, you then need to be trained by a current sangoma. And so then you go for training, and it, depending on you, depending on the process, it could take, many, many years to become a sangoma yourself. And I then drew in this lovely, I love her, the sangoma that is Karabu's teacher. She's an old, crotchety woman, and she likes to give Karabu a hard time, and she hates William, and she doesn't think much of the others. And but she's quite quirky, and she is an amazing sangoma. She really sees stuff. And this character was so fun to create. So I really had a lot of fun with her, and that whole element of, teacher and pupil within the spiritual realm, and trying to bring that sense of spirituality through this other character, to try and show Karabu the way, if you want to put it that way. And and that was quite nice. But yeah, I hope I've done it all justice, and I hope that I have sensitively given enough information and insight to allow people to maybe then go and look up more information, or seek further insight and understand what the sangoma is and the process that's involved.
I think it's great. When we return, we'll be talking more with Mel Lewis. We're going to ask her golden nuggets of wisdom, as well as how to find her, how to connect with her on social media, and better yet, how to be able to purchase the books for your kids and learn more about the adult fiction that she's also written as well. So stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. We'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Mel Lewis and I have been here in studio talking about her latest trilogy and all the works that she has done. And right before the break, we were talking about the spiritual component and the spiritual calling within this book that I thought was profound. I feel like that's very important, because I think that many of us are called to do something that's more outside of ourselves. That's to help other people, to help the civilization, to help the folks around us, whether it's, grassroots or what. But I feel like to some degree, all of us have that depth of wanting to help, needing to help, and being there to help. And I love how she's incorporated that, and really her main character in the trilogy. Mel, I have a question, and I ask this of all the folks that I have on the show. And so, I hate to put you on the spot with this, but, what are 3, golden nuggets of thought or wisdom that you feel is important today to share with the Live Your True Life community?
Wow. Okay. Those are big questions, but okay. So I guess for myself, and kind of starting this new year, I always do a bit of a, look back at the past year. And I feel like the thing that I really learned last year, and it's maybe going to sound cliche, was that in terms of people and the stuff that they carry with them, we really, really don't know what is going on with a lot of people. And, we hide behind our phones, we WhatsApp, we misunderstand the content, the context. We post, fake smiles on social media. And I feel like last year there was a lot of things that were misconstrued or misunderstood between friends. And so for me, a big one in this year is around really taking the time, if you feel someone's having a go at you or is not understanding you, picking up the phone. I know we can't always necessarily meet over a coffee in these times, but pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone and really understand them and really connect and hear their voice. So that's my one for this year that I'm going to try and definitely do a lot more of. And then the second one would really be about sitting within yourself, or having that feeling as though your heart is big and heavy and it sits within your chest, and you are now really within yourself. I find that often we get trapped up in our thoughts. They run away with us, the things we have to do, the things we should have done. I should be over here. I need to answer this email. I should be answering that WhatsApp. Have I done this? Have I got the groceries, the dog food? And we never really sit within ourselves and connect to ourselves. And things like meditation, exercise, just closing yourself in a room by yourself and sitting without a device are so important in terms of connecting with yourself and letting whatever is really sitting on your heart kind of come up. So I think we all just need a little bit more space and to give ourselves time to breathe, if that makes any sense. So that would be my second one. And then the third one would be to, get in as many hugs as you can, you know.
I like it.
If you whether it's a fur baby, so, a pet, or whether it's your kids or your partner, hug people, really connect, feel like chest to chest, heart to heart, and really, really connect with people and be real. And so I would definitely recommend lots of hugs. It's good for you.
I love your 3 nuggets. Those are great. Those are inspiring. And I always ask that because everybody has a really unique perspective. And I think that's powerful to hear, what goes through people's heads, but also things that are very important to the folks that I'm interviewing here on the show. So where do we find you? Where, anybody that's listening to the show, listening to the podcast, where can we find you first off, social media wise?
Okay, so social media-wise, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and that is Mel Lewis Author. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you desire to do so. It is it's much more kind of on the business side of what I do, but if that's your preferred platform, that's great. I'm on Twitter, not that often, but I'm on Twitter as well as UltraMel21. But the easiest way to find me is really on my website, and that is melinalewis.com. So super easy. You can then connect to all my social media from there. You can drop me an email. It's all there. So that's melinalewis.com, and you can find out everything you need to know over there.
Awesome. And then also, can you go online to Amazon for the books as well?
Yes, you can definitely go onto Amazon. That's exactly where you get the books. You can get them as an ebook, if the kids are on kind of an e-reader, or otherwise you can just actually get the print-on-demand books. So what that is that you just order a printed book off Amazon and kind of they print it up and send it to you anywhere in the world. So, it's amazing.
That's awesome, Mel. I have enjoyed having you on the show. I look forward to having you back on. I know that you're going to be continue writing. I know that you are prolific, so I look forward to having you back, and hopefully you'll come back on if you don't mind.
Oh, I would love. That would be great.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Powerful, and just love the books. And I just think it's what you're doing is great, and I respect it and admire it, and I think it's great reads for folks, and I think it'll be good for their kids as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on the show. So, thank you to you.
Great interview with Mel Lewis. When you get a chance, check out these great books. The characters are wonderfully created. They're joined together with these other characters that connect with one another, tell a story. And the most amazing thing is that pretty much anyone who's reading it is going to connect with one of those characters in one way or another. I liked how she has intertwined, history, adventure, spirituality, growing up. And I remember when I was a young teen and looking for books to connect with, I had to connect with books that connected with me and where I felt I was at and what my identity was at that time. And I think these books do just that. So when you get a chance, check them out. In the meantime, remembering it's all about being mindful. It's about connecting with our higher self. It's about doing what we love. Sometimes we have to work other jobs. We have to do other things, but somehow we're not finding time to do what we love, to expose ourselves to things that are powerfully positive, and to allow ourselves to do things that we didn't think we were able to do, to create things that we didn't think that we were able to or had enough time to create. It's about pushing that envelope in an authentically powerful way, finding that connection and moving our life forward, being better than we were yesterday. Take care. I'll be back with another show very shortly. And Live Your True Life Perspectives with me, your host, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 3 shades.